October deadline of individuals who had fallen behind in their water payments. We were awarded around $380,000. However, it was based on submitting somewhere close to a little over $1 million in uncollectibles during that time. This may have changed and this is transforming, but that is part of where we're also going to look for more support from the state to help our residents who may have fallen behind during this time.
And along those lines, Mr. Mayor and others, Ms. Adams, Ms. Patrice and others are working on a formula to make sure that the allocation of the $382,000 that the manager is speaking about meets the guidelines that have been set up by the state. Second, we'll be able to show you a little bit of detail in terms, all of the details in terms of the allocations. The one thing that the manager talked about, our application was to the tune, when we made the request, was about $1.4 million, and we got $382,000 in this process for utility assistance. The other thing, as we move forward in terms of rate study and collection, we also got to evaluate what does that $382,000 do as we provide that do for us in terms of our collection rates and things of this nature, as we provide that information to our rate studies evaluators, financial evaluators. And Mr. Floyd and others have been doing an excellent job in terms of keeping that conversation going, and open conversation, and providing the necessary information that the financial advisors are seeking. The last thing that I would say along those lines, keep in mind, the manager just alluded to, with AWA and South Central, which is our regional partners, a part of our letter to the state is requesting a total of $125 million for upgrades for South Central and AWA. To the tune, if we get what we anticipate, what we hope, that would probably be 90% of those dollars and cents, which would still leave us to the tune of about 25, $30 million or so, of which we are in some days 58.2%, some days 62%. Then whatever that additional cost, we've got to figure out how to address that, as well as our ongoing debt service cost that would be associated with what we pay for South Central and others as it relates to collections for water as well as sewer in that process.
Okay, thank you. I know Councilman Hill had a question.
Yeah, just what was our collection rate prior to COVID? Do we have an estimate, just roughly what were we collecting? Because I know it had gone up. I know we were doing pretty good.
Yeah, we were doing good, and I'm going to ask Ms. Patrice to help us, because one of the things that Ms. Patrice we started to talk about the other day was we're going to go back and come to you with our full slide deck of what we presented to you all a year ago, and compare that to where we are at this time. At one point in time, we were trending somewhere at one point in time close to 80%. And then there was conversations, I know, a big push about how do we get to 90%, how do we get X, Y, Z. But the reality of it is, when you throw in COVID and we deal with some historical stuff, those numbers get to be offset a little bit. So Ms. Patrice probably has a more accurate answer to that if she's on there, or Mr. Floyd, who've been looking at the numbers and assist. However, what we're going to do is update the slide deck. We're going to come back to you all with a tabulation to show you where we were in the past, where we are now, and based on our financial advisors, what do we need to do to be able to continue to move in the right direction. So Ms. Patrice and Mr. Floyd, if either of you all have any—
I'll start with this, Mr. Lyons. So when we first started our conversation under the Bob Group, we reported around a 65% collection rate. Some of that involved around the fact that we weren't billing. There was issues with accuracy of bills, but in our early discussions, we were at a 65. We have skirted and moved that needle forward and got upwards of an 85, and sometimes we even reported a 90% collection rate. We were very happy to be at that 80% collection rate at our last conversations pre-COVID, which have now kind of moved in a different direction once we stopped disconnections. And so Ms. Patrice or Mr. Floyd, I'm not sure if I see them on here, and if you can unmute yourself, Ms. Patrice.
I'm unmuted. I was trying to pull the slide deck. We gave 2 presentations to council. One was in February of last year, where we gave the collection for the quarter. The other was one that was prepared for the July print report out. And so I was trying to pull that up. I don't have the exact figure for you yet. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You're fine.
Okay, I don't have the exact percentage. It was between 70 and 80% that we reported out. And so I know we posted the decks on the website. So what I can do at the conclusion of the meeting is I can send the link to the last report out. The team is, however, refreshing that.
That's fine. I mean, that's fine. I just want to know what was the estimate back at that time. You don't have to be exact. So around about 80%. So my next question is, because I don't want to, my next question is, do we owe anything, any outstanding, bills? I'm not talking about our residents. I'm just talking about the city as relate to anything dealing with water. Do we owe anything, my city manager?
No, sir. We are paying our ORWA, and in fact, they've acknowledged the fact that our payments have been prompt when it comes to South Central and ORWA. Our biggest issues is getting things processed and making sure we get the documentation. But when we receive them, we start the process right away under Ms. Elliott's leadership. Would that be correct, Ms. Elliott?
Yes, ma'am. We are promptly paying our bills. We're not behind in any regard. Actually, our vendors are excited because we're being proactive in paying our bills, especially coupled with our bank transition. We've been reaching out to people we even pay electronically to say, hey, we've changed banks. We want to make sure your payment still is going through. And so they've been excited. VRS, for one, has been particularly excited that we're being proactive and making sure they get their funds to pay for retirement. And so, yes, we are paying our bills promptly. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam City Manager and Ms. Patrice. No other questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, now at this time, I'm moving to Councilman Cuthbert. His video is not working, but his audio is.
Okay.
So, Councilman Cuthbert, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And I have no clue what's going on. I'm just not able to start the video or restart the video. I did have it initially, and then I turned it off to go get some papers. And when I came back, I could not turn the video back on, but I do have audio, so I'm grateful for that. Mr. Mayor, I have a question. I couldn't quite understand everything, but it sounded kind of like we've lost between $750,000 and $1 million due to COVID, even after crediting the reducing the loss by the amount of the grant that we got from the I guess the COVID program, or else the state.
Right. Ms.
Yes,
Benavides?
Yes, sir. Our collections are definitely not where they were pre-COVID. And part of our challenge that we're having is that individuals are, due to whatever unforeseen circumstance, are not paying as much as possible. When we reported to the state, all the cities were eligible to submit their COVID request. Our submittal was about 1.4 million at the time. And that could vary from someone being $25 past due to upwards of $1,000 past due for non-payment. If you recall, one of the emergency orders that occurred from the governor's office required that we connect and reconnect all water that was disconnected. And as we started this conversation, we also had individuals who were disconnected who were by some means illegally obtaining water. We have now been accounting for those accounts because what we did was we reactivated those accounts, and that would also account for some of them, which was around 130 accounts that were not on the books that are now back on the books, and we are tracking their usage also.
And for how long will we be under, for how long is the governor's mandate going to last that requires us to supply free water?
Well, we're under a different mandate because it was the health department. And so I've been speaking with our city attorney for us to try to get a legal opinion if we are when relief comes. The other jurisdictions have resumed water disconnections. We have not, given the fact that we were under a specific health order given our health disparities. And so I will be working with our city attorney to get a follow-up ruling whether or not we are still under the mandate. In talking to the other city managers, they did send notice to their residents to say that they would start back with their disconnections, and many of them caught up at the time. But unfortunately, the other cities are not at the level of delinquency that we are in.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. India and others, as we go back to the $382,000 we were talking about, which our initial request was for the $1.4 million that we went to the state. Ms. Adams and Ms. Elliott are doing an excellent job trying to work their way through the list. The last account was we had close to, and if Ms. Adams is on the phone, we had close to 14, if not close to 1,500 requests as it relates for assistance as it relates to that $382,000. She, along with Ms. Elliott and others, are trying to, one, follow the rules and guidelines by the state, but to be able to come back with a comprehensive report that speaks to how the allocation of those resources will be applied.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I guess we're all tussling with the question of how can we run a city if we cannot collect for the water that we supply? And I don't know the answer to that, but we need a game plan. We cannot continue indefinitely just pumping water for free. What's the game plan for pulling out of this? When should we be petitioning the health department in Richmond for to lift that order? Should we disregard the order? Should we just ignore reality and let our utility fund continue to suffer? These are tough questions. I don't know the answers to, don't even have an inclination as what the answer should be, but we're going to have to address these difficult issues pretty soon. When are we going to?
My recommendation, council member, is for the city attorney and I to this week send a letter to the state requesting clarity, and our city attorney is on here and for his opinion on this, requesting clarity of if this has been lifted. And then we are waiting and did not want to put council in a bad position, but we've got to just make a business decision on when do we resume business as usual and start disconnections again. And that's going to be a big push because, as you can recall, if we say it's a 1.4 million in this batch, that's just from the March till December. Remember that larger batch is much more. And so we've got to make a decision where we are and what we want to do from a business standpoint and moving forward.
Mr. Mayor, may we put this on our work session agenda for revisit on March 2? Let's keep the issue alive and until we develop a consensus as to where we want to go. But in my view, the status quo cannot exist indefinitely. I suspect we all agree with that. And the question is going to be, when do we put a stop to the status quo? When do we shift over to doing cutoffs like the other jurisdictions that our city manager has referred to are doing? So bottom line, may we revisit this on March 2, please, as an agenda item?
Yes, we can. And next, is Mr. Williams there? Does he want to chime in on this issue?
Sure. I guess I would say when this whole COVID thing started, I gave an extensive presentation to council where my opinion is that the order that was given from the health department was unlawful ab initio. They singled the city of Petersburg out among all other cities to have this special disparate treatment imposed without any objective reasons for doing so. And so at that time, my opinion was we should pursue legal action against the state for having done so. My opinion hasn't changed on the legality of that order. I think it was unlawful when they implemented it, and it remains unlawful. So the choice that has to be made, I think, is one, do you approach the health department and ask them to rescind it? Or two, do you simply ignore it and dare them to come forward and try to enforce it? That is a decision, as Councilman Cuthbert has said, that needs to be made. I have previously discussed with the manager and recommended reaching out to Dwayne Roadcap with the health department. He was their point person, and it sounds like that's the direction she's at least planning to head in anticipation of the March 2nd meeting. That's probably a good first step, but I think council does need to ultimately decide if we do not get satisfaction going the route that the manager is recommending, what your next steps will be. But like I said, I think that order should never have been issued, should never have singled the city of Petersburg out. And it's a battle worth fighting if they're not willing to back off of it, in my opinion.
All right, next, Councilwoman Wilson Smith.
Yes, we can't do this on the first meeting in March because that's not a work session meeting, right? That's a reporting meeting, if I'm understanding our new rules.
I think the
So
first
meeting is the work session.
Meeting is the business meeting. So yes, that would be correct. The work session presentation is the first meeting. The second meeting is the business meeting. Is that correct, Attorney Williams?
That's right. So March 2nd is the meeting at which you would receive this type of presentation.
Okay, and can we actually make decisions without having the figures in front of us that somebody's coming back to us with? Can we say which way we should be going without that information?
One of the things that we would anticipate between now and then with Mr. Floyd and others' help, we will continue to be working with Davenport. We will also be updating the slide deck that Ms. Elliott just spoke about. We will be able to, we anticipate to be able to come back with you to give you a full range of the information that we have that at least allows for further conversation as it relates to the work study, for you to understand clearly the magnitude of where we are, as well as where are we as it relates to our collection, and what are some recommendations that we will offer moving forward.
Okay, and the last thing is the discussion of suing the state because they have singled us out. I think we might want to look at that and look at it differently. I'm not in support of suing the very hand, biting the hand who's going to feed us. We want money from them. We need assistance from the state. We need a lot of things from the state, but then we want to turn around and sue them. It's like biting the hand that feeds you. I'm just not in support of that. I just want that to be on the record.
All right, Vice Mayor Smith-Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just need to know, do we have what percentage of the citizens that are not paying their water bill?
Well,
utility.
Let me ask, can you hear me? Can I ask India? India, could you come on, please?
Yes.
India has been working and managing the utility assistance program that just covers this phrase. We have around 14,000 total accounts, and individuals eligible. How many people were eligible for this?
So when we looked at this initially, there were about 3,800 people in our system who were eligible based on all of the applications we got back, both online and via paper. We ended up with 1,620 applicants, which we are still going through to determine eligibility. One of the things we set in the criteria was clear and accurate applications with account numbers and everything. And due to some of the issues we had with the post office, we did allow people to have a little bit more time to mail in those applications. But unfortunately, we had some folks who, quite a few folks who actually turned in applications with either incorrect address, incorrect names, or incorrect account numbers. So we are working with our vendor to go through that and match that information as accurately as possible so we can get a clear representation of how much we'll actually, the ask that we actually have from those applications, and compared to the $382,494 we have to apply to these accounts.
So I think what the Councilwoman asked is, and what we're focusing on with this project is our residential accounts. What we find in some of our commercial and corporate accounts is you look at a billing, some of them may cut checks quarterly and pay up, and so those are in a different bucket. I think the question is what percentage? So we know we're over 10%, but we also need to be able to give you by next week how many of these are residential accounts. And as I said, in looking at the last spreadsheet I saw, some of them may vary from $20 to $15. Some are far more. One of the things that are in the criteria is it cannot cover past due amounts dated prior to March. And so we're only focusing on that bucket of funding. And so in clarifying, that's going to help a lot. There are people who may fall in this category who may have had a previous bill and they're paying on that bill to try to get the previous bill down while the current one's starting to add up. And so there are a lot of variables in it, but we're over 10% of our residents have fallen behind.
Another question. Thank you. The funds that Dominion Power gave to the city, but it went to Pathways. Can you elaborate on that?
I have not been tracking that. In the initial setup of it, what we've done is when people go to Dominion or go over to Pathways to apply, we would provide them the information on their bills. Ms. Tyus, who's on the line, may have some more information on it. I know that had not been moving. I had a brief conversation with Dominion to try to track it. One of the hopes I would have is if there are funding left, that some of this could be applied to the COVID individuals. But Ms. Tyus may have some indication of where they are right now with those fundings that's in Pathways.
Good morning, Council. I can get us an update on it. We have not been tracking. We've been referring residents directly to Pathways. But by the time we have another discussion, I'd be happy to get an update from Pathways on that project.
Thank you, Ms. Tice.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. That concludes my questions.
Okay, what we're looking at is I'm adding this to our work session agenda on March 2nd, which is definitely time is of essence, because if we are facing over $1 million shortfall in funding, I know part of of what we had heard from our talks with the state was that they were going to help supplement with assistance covering these the COVID gap with that order. So it's definitely something we got to take into consideration, because we still have to pay our, and this would definitely provide a hardship to all of our citizens that are paying, because we still have to pay for that the water we buy from our every month. And we have held back and did the right thing to not have a combative relationship with the state, because like Councilwoman Wilson Smith said, we're not trying to be adversarial, but if they're doing this order to help in COVID, we still have to hold them to providing the funding so we can pay our bills on the city side, because this is an easy way to bankrupt the city with an open-ended water flow in which we have constant water flowing and with no accountability and no assistance with the state to cover this. So we'll continue this subject on March 2nd, and I will move on to option B, which was the technology system update on the ERT project.
ERP.
Ms. Benavidez?
So I'm going to have India to take you. When we met before, we had a discussion about one of the challenges we've had and responsibilities that we have to accept is that we've been operating on pretty antiquated technology. Miss India Adams-Jacobs will be our project lead on rolling out our new enterprise resource system. And so part of what we're looking at is one is identifying a lead, two is talking about the funding, and three is making sure that post my departure, this project continues to move forward. And so we know that we have a great team with Garrett and Robert and Patrice and all of those guys, but we want to have a point person who's going to not only take this football and pass it along, but keep us moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over to India just to talk a little bit, and I'll chime in where necessary.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please, Gary. Just a refresher, we talked about this a few months ago, but what is our ERP system? It refers to the type of software and organization that an organization uses to manage our day-to-day business activities, such as procurement, HR, risk, and asset management. Next slide. How is it used? We talked about this a little bit as well, but it really helps to manage our processes for our internal agencies, our internal processes. It helps to manage utility building, tax collection, code enforcement, fund accounting. It also helps to track our budget and our spending to make sure that we're allocating funding correctly. Tracks collection of taxes, also helps with services, licensing, and permitting. It also makes sure that we can streamline our money collection processes as well. The city manager just alluded to, next slide, thank you, a little bit about our project team. I've been assigned as the project manager, team lead. Mr. Van Voorhees, our IT director, will also be on our project team, as well as Mr. Robert Floyd. Ms. Alicia Mann, who is our management fellow analyst, will serve as our project assistant. And then as we move forward with the process, we'll look to procure a project management firm to really help with the heavy lift of this type of process and this integration that we will need assistance with. As the city manager alluded to, we are a rather lean organization, and a project of this magnitude that's going to take at least 3 to 4 years will take a significant amount of time and input, but we will need some external assistance and expertise as we work to move through the implementation of this process. Move forward to our next slide. We've shared our implementation timeline, but I wanted to give you all a brief update where we are. As Mr. Lyons had spoke about a little bit earlier, we've been working with our investors to look at our potential funding mechanisms, really look at things holistically. We have an opportunity due to our fund balance to look to borrow funding for this and have some pretty favorable terms given where we are financially at this point, thanks to the great work of our financial and budget teams and our city manager and council direction. We're also looking to define our procurement processes. We have some opportunities to either go through a traditional RFP process or look to piggyback off a contract with the state. We know of some other localities in the state who have recently gone through ERP implementations within the last year or so. So really looking at where we already know localities have done this well, so that we can look to kind of model those best practices and ensure that we get off on the right footing and don't take a whole lot of time getting through at least the initial phases of this process so we can get the ball rolling. From there, with the rest of 2021, we'll look to really select a vendor and then move into that contract negotiation and data cleansing. We talked a little bit about looking forward towards 2022 through 2024 with the different phases of this project, from training to data conversion, financial management, and including the budget, with a long look by 2024 to have our utility billing and remaining modules put in place by 2024. As we spoke about, we've talked to our investors with Davenport and Company about our potential options, and really looking more recently with borrowing funding specifically on a short-term loan to be able to get this project going. And with that, I'll turn it back over to city manager or council to answer any questions that you may have.
Just to tie to what you mentioned, I spoke with Davenport a little bit about the funding opportunities with it, and they were very favorable with this opportunity. One of the key criteria that we have to focus on is, although we'll have India as the project manager, I strongly recommend that we bring in an outside technology firm to really help with India and Garrett in this process, because it really is going to take some heavy lifting. We are a very lean IT organization currently, and in that organization, you've got Mr. Garrett, Robert Slovak, Mr. Booker, and one employee who's left. And so we have 2 vacancies, but they still have day-to-day technology management in the city. And so I think that in making sure that this happens, this is the most important system we will implement. And we have learned a lot of lessons from our last technology implementation with our water system. And so I think that that's going to be at the top of the list of things to do, is have a partner to assist with this. In rolling it out in a phased approach, I think that's going to be valuable to the city. And the most important thing that both teams are going to have to work on is data cleansing. The key to any system is making sure that the information that goes into the new system is clean data that will not start the problems that we've seen in the past, where we start looking at accounts and noticing multiple accounts and multiple account numbers that are assigned to people. So that's a heavy lift project. But I do think we've got the dedication to keep this moving. My farewell to you all is that this is something that will definitely transform our operation. I believe that even talking to our financial managers and hearing that, and even discussing it with our S&P group on our bond, they recognize this is the next step. And even talking to our state partners and sharing it with them, they recognize that this is very, very important for the city and moving forward.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Adams-Jacobs. Next, I take questions from members of council, starting with Councilman Cupper. Councilman Cupper, if you unmuted and muted back again.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, there, yes.
I don't know what's going on here. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Benavidez, just ask this. I see a lot of this ties in together with our utility system. If we, can you give us the reality of being that we are behind due to having a backlog in non-payments and utilities? How far does this push us back, do you think, being that if this order sticks around for another year or so, will it prevent us? How far does that push us back to getting to the upgrade in the technology system?
I think the issue is getting the data. I think it's going to give us a better tracking mechanism. Part of the challenges, and I know Garrett is on here, and I'd love for him to join us in the conversation, in working and understanding folks who are at this phase of implementing the utility system. We put the cart before the horse, and part of the challenges we have with our new meter system is not ensuring that that meter system would integrate to the main system. And Garrett can talk a little bit about this, and I'd like to turn it over to him to talk some about the overall process.
I think when the meter system that did not go well, went through the process, it was, for better saying, lack of management on their side and on our side, honestly, and that's where Madam City Manager is talking about. We desperately need, an outside full-time project manager, somebody who can run this process from both sides, make sure that we pilot it correctly, that the transition is done, that we spend the time. A lot of this time in any of these projects is before the implementation. It's that pre-part where we clean up the data, we make sure that we map all the pieces from old system to new system. Spend time on training. All of that, takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to do correctly. But if you do it that way, when you get to that point where you're doing that cutover, it's going to be a whole lot smoother. There are not going to be nearly as many mistakes, and everybody will be much happier. And I might still have a job.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one thing, sir.
You will still have a job.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add
yes.
one thing. As we move forward to coming back to you in March on this, there are still other decisions as an organization and separate and apart from the cutoff. I think at one point in time, the manager's goal in working with Ms. Elliott and others was also to come back and offer some recommendations of things that help us to start the cleanup process. Because in some instances, some of the hiccups are things that we have not been able to collect over a period of time. Then we also got to make sure that as we continue to move through this process, staff has done a great job cleaning us up, but there is still work that has to be done on that piece. And we hope that when we come back to you in March for your work study session, we'll be able to have some of that kind of a conversation or some other recommendations that you may consider as we move towards trying to start another system, because those things will ultimately be some things that if you don't address will still be challenges for our staff in terms of collection.
And yes, yes, ma'am, and Mayor and Council, if I may interject, I apologize. Both Stacy and Monty are not on the call today. They're actually on some needed leadership training, which is very valuable to the city, which has been phenomenal thus far. But I wanted to mention that I think we have the infrastructure and the skill set now in place, and we're poised to do an ERP implementation. It's not easy by any stretch of the imagination, but Monty is a super user of the Munis system. He's familiar with some of the local systems that other localities are utilizing. Stacy has implemented SAP at private sector companies as well as other entities, and she's familiar with the legacy system that we utilize even at the city of Richmond and here at the city of Petersburg. And so I think we have some business analyst level users and super users and implementers who can better position the city to partner with an external consultant, just not unlike what the state did when it implemented its system, going from green screen to an ERP package. They actually went to PeopleSoft. And so I think the city is poised to allow us to leverage the tools that are now available, and that will allow us to get the information that we need to make better business decisions more readily. It's difficult right now to get data out of the system for utility relief, to give the percentages that Councilwoman asked for as far as customers. But with the new ERP systems like Munis and some of these other packages, it's a push button. It's more user friendly. We can give you information consistently at the ready. I remember we were doing the query for utility relief and we had to have 3 different departments tested 3 ways to Sunday to make sure we came up with the same results. And so I think the ERP is a good thing. It takes a while to get there. There's lots of risk involved, but to mitigate that risk, we just have to have people with those skill sets that exist throughout the organization, people who can write policies and procedures, people who can implement systems, people who can analyze data, people who can clean up data, that can be partner with IT and with a implementation vendor to accomplish results. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mayor, as you can see, we've got the right people to do it at this time. And so what makes this a good process and a good program for us is that we have people who've been with other systems who can help us to move forward, and our surrounding jurisdictions who've also moved to new systems that will help us to better with lessons learned along the way.
Okay. Thank you all. Any other questions about the ERP? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item C, the status.
I got a question. Okay.
Okay, there's a question. Okay, Vice Mayor Smith-Lee.
Okay, so when we implemented and put in the new meters some time ago before I came on council, from what I gather and what my thinking process is, we needed to have set up a pilot program because we went live all together versus just taking a portion of the city and seeing if the system works and everything like that. So we really need to make sure that we dot every I and cross every T when we implement, this new technology software.
That is absolutely correct. And
one of the challenges, ma'am, that you had as well, and Mr. Garrett can speak to it, is not only the conversion and moving over from one phase to the other. When we went back and dissected this, And Mr. Garrett can tell you that one of the big problems that we have in that past history is we did not even have a dedicated project manager that was managing it and it was leading the cutover in that whole process. So not to be disrespectful, based on my years of experience in other places I've been, that system, based on what they did, was doomed to fail because nobody was leading it and nobody was doing the cutover. Garrett, you may have extra input.
No, I mean, that's exactly, I saw it as a case. It's one of the first things when I'd been here maybe 2 months and went into a meeting, and that was one of my first questions was, who's the project manager? And there wasn't anyone in the room that could answer that question, and that was the first idea that things weren't going well.
Yep, and Councilwoman, as you'll see, what we're proposing is a phased approach, and you'll find that the utility is the last phase. There's the financial portion of it, and you use the systems in your current job, but it's making sure that we go section by section. This works well, let's move to the next section. This works well. We know that the most complicated portion of it is going to be that utility section of it. So by the time we get there, we want to make sure that we've got all the other stuff moving along the way, but we know that we've got to do it, but we want to make sure that we've got everybody on board and have a check and balance along the way.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks again for the presentation. We'll move on to item C, the status of conversion of West and Washington Street to two-way. Mr. Lyons.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I apologize. I sent each and every one of you all the latest report in this process that we did back in Timmins back in August of 2018. As an aside from that, in addition to that, Ms. Ennis provide a brief response to some of the more specific questions that were asked by a council member or two at the last meeting. As I am talking, Garrett, please allow Ms. Ennis to host and to share her slide deck. In essence, as why she's pulling this up, really, Timmins, we paid them an amount of money to come back and tell us about where we were in this process. Basically, in order to move forward with the next study, we were talking about another $110,000 for the next phase of the study. As Ms. Ennis would walk you through the process, it's not just Washington and width. The report will also highlight to you that they will have to do a review of intersections in about 23 additional spots. The last thing that I would say before I let Ms. Ennis take us through this process, it's not just a one-way or conversion those into one. You also have major utility challenges in terms of the way your street lights and others are done. And the last piece was that if you move to this piece, you're going to have major construction interruptions in this process. So Ms. Ennis has her presentation up. Ms. Ennis, will you take it from there, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Mayor, members of council, Madam City Manager, Deputy City Manager, and City Attorney, as well as the public. We received the attached scope of services from Timmins Group, which was actually done in August of 2018 at the request of the City Council. This scope includes 2 phases. Phase 1 would include a preliminary engineering study of the average daily traffic count. It also would come up with a few planning concepts for Washington and width and the possible conversion of a two-way. Timmins Group also had proposed in the second phase that will begin with an in-depth study to analyze different traffic conditions, as well as like pedestrian sidewalks, parking, etc. As you can see on this particular sheet, that it would take approximately 23 streets as well as intersections that will need to be reviewed, and if the council so chooses to move forward with this project. At this time, we have not moved forward with this because funds has not been identified, and we did not receive any further instruction as to whether or not this is something that the council would choose for us to move forward. The total amount that would be spent for this scope of services should, at that time, because we would have to have it revisited and updated, is approximately $120,000 in total. So if y'all have any other questions for me, I am available to answer them.
You said 120,000 in total. That is for to complete the study?
For both phases. So the first phase will be approximately 18,500. The second phase would be 85,000 and included any type of public meetings as well as budget estimates for the actual construction. Because with this will be a major undertaking. We would have to have several public meetings with VDOT. We'd have to talk to the state for its impacts on I-95 and a few of the other on and off ramps throughout the city.
And Mr. Mayor, please keep in mind, sir, that these figures, the $120,000 figure is based on August of 2018. We're not sure if those numbers are higher or lower moving forward, sir.
Okay. And is it possible, being we dealing with VDOT, is to get this under the smart scale projects to get some state funding?
Yes, sir. We can actually submit in the next phase for smart scale funding for this project. We can do that.
Okay. Well, will they cover some of these study fees in that? If it meets the criteria?
It all depends on what the criteria would be. Like they may decide that they only want to pay for the preliminary engineering, or they might decide that they want to pay for phase 2, but it all depends on the criteria at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
The essence of this, Mr. Mayor, this is without doubt a major undertaking. The study is one thing. The reality of it is them paying for the study, and even if they give you the okay, the issue in terms of your construction cost and the impact on traffic. Secondly, some of your utilities which go a certain direction will have to be turned the opposite direction in that whole process. The other question of it is, Ms. Ennis and I would be willing as well to find out that based on your MPO and others that we know that you and individuals like Mr. Kuntz and others sit on, we can take a look at all options in terms of, is there any resources or dollars and cents that can help us move to the next phase. But even if you get to the next phase, it is a big undertaking.
Okay. Questions from members of council? Councilman Cutler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to revisit this again, or I'd like also to put this on our March 2 work session for further discussion. And I wonder in the meantime, if staff could would explore the thought raised by Mayor Parham, and that is whether there's any grant money that we might seek for the planning stage as opposed to the construction stage. Let's take it maybe a step at a time. Even if there's not any money for the planning, I'd also like to know whether it's realistic to think that there would be any money for the actual implementation of the plan, if that's what council decided to do. And I ask staff if between now and our March 2 work session, staff would address both of those questions. One, potential grants for the study, and two, potential grants for implementation of the conversion. In my view, while the cost is hard to swallow, it's certainly quite substantial. I think the conversion to two-way may well pay for itself. I think the one-way system is restricting greatly the development of the intersection of I-95 at exit 52 with Washington Street and Wythe Street. I suspect that conversion to one-way had a very detrimental effect on the business of the old Ramada Inn. I suspect that the continuing one-way street pattern is severely restricting opportunities to develop what used to be the Holiday Inn site that the city owns. Likewise, severely restricting the success of what used to be the Holiday Inn, the Howard Johnson's. And I'm sure there are tens, if not hundreds, of smaller businesses that would greatly benefit from converting Washington and Wythe to two-way. It really galls me when I see big dump trucks going through Petersburg, or heavy trucks of all kinds going through Petersburg, just because they find it so convenient with this one-way passage that we've created for through traffic. There really is a value to cultivating local traffic in our downtown. And so for all of those reasons, I think this is worth looking into. Madam City Manager, would you ask staff please to report back to council with whatever information staff can gather and do so on March 2, and in that report address possible funding sources from outside of our municipal funds for both the planning and the implementation of the conversion.
Absolutely, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Lyons, and he'll work with Mr. Miller on making sure that it's on the agenda, but also looking at funding sources from both the state as well as other entities that may help from an economic development standpoint.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members of council? Vice Mayor Smith Lee?
Yes. Is the system now, is it broken? Because when I go through Hopewell, they have, you go down one side of the 36 and then you come back up the other side. So I'm trying to figure out what's broken. For Wolf Street being going all the way down through 301 and Washington Street coming back, what's broken?
Mr. Mayor, is Mr. Howard Myers on this call?
No, he is not.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to respond to this question by our Vice Mayor. And this is something, it's a legitimate question. Is it going to be worth the cost? Why are we straining to do this? My sense is that the one-way system really discourages the development of businesses along the one-way track. I certainly would never point to Hopewell as an example of successful planning.
Well, they have a lot of businesses that going one way and coming back the other.
Do we?
We have to remember one thing about how people want to come in the city of Petersburg, whether it's a one-way street or not. If they want to come, they're gonna come.
My sense is that we've created a raceway and a thoroughfare for getting through Petersburg, rather than an environment where businesses can benefit from slower moving traffic and people can easily find convenient places to do business. I think this is the reason why our hotels have failed so miserably. Let's just focus on that. It's the devil to get off of I-95 and get to, let's say, where the Holiday Inn used to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's the devil to get off of exit 52 and get to where the Howard Johnsons used to be. And it's the devil even to get across Washington Street to get over to the Ramada Inn off of exit 52. And that's just exit 52. I don't know the exit number coming northbound off of I-95 at Washington Street, but once you get off that exit, it's the devil to get over to the Holiday, where the Holiday Inn used to be. It's the devil to get over to where Howard Johnson's used to be. You can't do it without going around a block, or a big block. Lots of turns, three or four turns, stoplights, and I think that discourages people. It would be great if northbound traffic off of I-95, when they get on Washington Street, if they could turn to the right, toward Blandford. They can't do that now. We've got an interstate that's got, what, I don't know how many, what the traffic count is, over 100,000 cars a day, I would think. And they cannot conveniently get to the hotel sites there at the exits. So I think that's a major impediment to significant business. But
Right. And
this is what we need to
at this-
study.
Right. And at this time, Councilman Cuthbert and Vice Mayor Smith-Lee, this is just looking at the potential of traffic flow. We have this huge park and ride structure that's coming up, in which they anticipate much more traffic coming into the city. I think at this time that we have a good shot of getting VDOT to cover the cost of that study, and then we'll have an accurate report of what's the best traffic flow for that area. Because I think it's been that way for some time, but it's still a good time to take a look at and make sure that we still have the best fit for our future business success in the city.
And I think the vice mayor raises a very good point. I mean, does the benefit justify the cost? I mean, that's a legitimate, very legitimate question. And I thank the vice mayor for raising it. I know what my instinct is, but I think we need more than just one person's instinct. We need, I'm not sure how we're going to develop a better feel for what the impact economically would be, but part of our decision-making process certainly needs to include a forecast of what would be the economic benefit of converting to two-way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Wilson Smith.
Thank you. In addition to the economic benefits, I'd like for us to look at the safety issues. Councilman Cuthbert talked about getting from one side of the street to the other. If you're walking, if you've got two-way traffic, you automatically have a safety issue because you got traffic coming in both directions, and that in itself is a problem. If we're going to look at this, I would like for us to look at it fairly with not just a study in our city, but reports from other cities that have converted back from one to the other, and how it went and how it was. I think if we're going to look at this, we cannot go by anybody's gut feelings or anything like that. We have got to have actual data, and we've got to have actual reports to look at this. So that's
right,
all I have to say about it.
Right, Council Wilson Smith, I agree. And part of the public safety issue that we have too, coming up on that Washington Street, Whip Street as it is, being we have a lot of growth in downtown, a lot of people living in downtown Petersburg again. If you're on 95, getting off on exit 52 around anytime between 3:30 to 6:30, 7 o'clock, you notice the Washington Street exit would back up almost into the highway. And it's a major issue of traffic flow there as well that really needs to be studied, because one of my biggest fears is that with everyone waiting at the stop sign in heavy rush hour, that we have a massive car pileup from someone pulling over trying to make the exit, but don't realize traffic is stopped into the interstate. So, but
that seems to be a fix that can be done by just rerouting that, where we have the old restaurant right there on the corner. If somehow VDOT could look at a structure where instead of going all the way up to the stop sign, you also had the availability of a lane cutting right there that goes all the way through land that we're not using, that would put us on the name of the street that I cannot think of. There are other avenues that we can use, which will accomplish the same goal off of that particular corridor.
Yes, and that the study will give us all of that information and data as well.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So next we'll move on to item D, which is the update on long-term fund balance goals. Ms. Benavides.
Well, Mayor, I think we will probably have a lot more on that next week. We have made great strides as an organization in rebuilding our fund balance. As you can recall, we talked about before the Bob Group left, we were at a negative $7 million fund balance. We ultimately improved that to our last CAFR, where we reported a positive of $8 million. As a result of that, we wanted to make sure that we also erred on some caution in seeing this happening and making sure that we reestablished and increased our goals. We talked a little bit, and I'll ask Mr. Floyd to join me in this conversation, about a 30, 60-day, 90-day cash flow balance. And then we also have upgraded our policies to state some things to include the policies that we were initially budgeting $1 million toward fund balance. And in our new policies, we moved to $500,000 toward fund balance and $500,000 toward capital improvements, which is some of the things we've been talking about today. Next week, we anticipate, and at this time when we started this, we weren't sure we'd have it ready. We anticipate bringing back to council and the public our final CAFR, which is a little past due, that will talk about where we are as a city as a whole. I need to start by saying this CAFR is for ending on June 30th. And so it only covered a few months of COVID. So things were much, much better during that time frame leading up to it. Most importantly, as we start to move forward, is where does that put us in respect to increasing our overall credit worthiness and credit rating? And so we will be having discussions this week with the S&P to talk about our long-term financial plan, which we've updated recently, but also where our draft CAFR is going to be and our final CAFR, which will be presented next Tuesday to council and to the citizens. As soon as we get a final document, and the reason I will say to council you haven't received it is they are still tweaking and making sure that all the numbers are correct, which are presented. And once we receive that, we will make that available to staff and council. Our auditors are anticipating being at our Tuesday meeting to present to us what they found for further discussion. And then we can go from there with the next steps for staff. One of the main things that, as you now have a fund balance that we have to work collectively with our treasurer on, is our investment policy. And part of that investment policy does fall under our treasurer. And now that we have funds available to look and work with financial planners on not only having that fund balance, but building that fund balance for the future. And I know Mr. Pritchard has had some discussions and looked at it, but we haven't had much for him to work with. We're starting out with at least an $8 million fund balance. I think we're at a point right now that that's available. The other thing, as many residents are aware of, is that we have taken away the need for a RAN, which was that high interest short-term loan. And that's a beauty. But part of that comes from having a fund balance that supports us through the ups and downs of our cash flow. And so I think most of this conversation will happen next Tuesday. And what we will look at as we get our final numbers is if we need to do any other changes to our policies, which I don't see right now, but we also want to start to move out of a dollar figure, which we used to talk about 6 and 7 and 8 million, to making sure that we can adequately state 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then have a policy for once you reach that 30, 60 day, 90 day, or whatever that we decide on, where the funding could be used for. Because what we don't want to do is immediately start to spending funds just because we have it in our savings account. Mr. Floyd, I know you're there. Can you add anything to that conversation?
No, ma'am, I think you wrapped that up really well, but I think it's important as we move into the development of the 21-22 budget that we do start having a lot of these conversations as it relates to use of the fund balance and things of that nature. So it was very timely that this was put on the agenda, at least to bring it to the attention of council, knowing that we'll be coming back, I believe on the 16th with the results of the CAFR.
Yes. And Mr. Floyd has already kicked off the budget process. We are now looking more comprehensively at our budget, to not just budgeting, but also tying this and linking this to our strategic plan. He's meeting with the staff one-on-one and having some very meaningful discussions. If you want to mention that, Mr. Floyd.
I was actually, that's fine. Yes, ma'am. I know I was going to do a nice little presentation on the March 2nd for our work session to kind of go through methodically what we're doing this year as it relates to the budget process and what our goals and objectives from the budget department are as it relates to that.
Okay. Thank you for the update. Any questions from members of the council? Councilman Cuthbert, are you there?
I'm here, and I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we look forward to that CAFR presentation next week. And the good news is coming with that. So next we'll move to item E, which is future development plan in the city with regards to restaurants, housing, and jobs. We put this on, Ms. Benavidez, just to get your insight. You've been here for some time now, and would like to just pick your brain on this topic of the things that we can do to grow these areas in the city.
Well, as we start to talk about what the future of Petersburg looks like, I think that building up our planning and economic development team has been really important to this. Looking at our comprehensive plan and our future land use planning, it's important not only to focus on where we are right now, but where we want to be. And that's a strategic conversation, not just with the city council, but with the citizens and with our business community. As we start focusing on development and redevelopment, which is what we're focusing on very heavily in our city, is how do we make sure that we have the proper balance between our housing mix and our industrial mix? We've been fortunate enough to have a strong economic development partner that has come in most recently via AMPAC and the jobs that are being created. But we also have to create the synergy to think about what are the things that they need in order to attract the people who are working there to also not only work in Petersburg, but reside in Petersburg. And that's going to be focusing on two parts. One is our housing component, our housing availability, but our housing is only as important as working with our public schools. We have got to continue to harness our relationship with our schools. When people look to relocate to a community, they're looking not only at the low cost of living that we have available here, but what about the educational opportunities that we have available? And we've got to continue to not only work with our public school, but even our governor's school, to make sure that we're creating those environments, and economic development is based on those components. When we look at our downtown development, we've brought a lot of businesses in. One of the conversations we've had there is not only that we need to bring those businesses in, but we've got to focus on the retention. And we've got to focus on what are those things that prevent them from closing down when we get to a pandemic, because they don't have the support structure and early on identification. As we are transitioning our Chamber of Commerce, I believe that it's important that role that they play when I got here was vital to supporting our local businesses. So we've got to keep that component tied back into it. We have had, unlike most communities, I can say at least 4 ribbon cuttings during this pandemic of new businesses opening in our community. Now, our goal is not only to cut the ribbon, but to come back a year later and celebrate their 1 year, 2 year, 3 year anniversary. And so that targeted effort is important for us to start back marketing. We're open for business. Come join us, come be here and be part of our community. And that's that holistic thing that has to happen. And when I got here, we had merged and talked about planning and economic development. Those two things go hand in hand. You're not going to do economic development without planning, and you're not going to do planning without economic development, and creating that continued synergy there for both of those.
Okay. Any questions from members of council?
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor.
Councilman Cutler?
Thank you. I think we need some outside help in devising a plan for our future. We are so used to looking around Petersburg and thinking, gee golly, it's just great, just the way it is, because it's so comfortable. But you get an outsider in here, and I think we might get a different assessment. And with that different assessment, I think will come more imaginative and aggressive ideas for turning this city around. If we drop back and look at what we've accomplished in the last 4 years in the way of planning, it's pretty meager. We've certainly been blessed with AMPAC. I don't know whether that's due to anything other than good fortune, but I think we need to take our future into our hands and try to shape that future. And I don't know when council did that. As I think back over Petersburg's history for the last 75 years, I don't see any evidence of long-term planning from city council. I think city council has reacted rather than led. And I think we need to be the first city council in a long, long time to lead the direction of the city. Now, I suspect everyone would agree with that. Then the questions are going to become, well, how do we lead this city? And I would welcome the thoughts of everybody on this council. And maybe my perception is challenged. Maybe everybody thinks council has been taking an aggressive, proactive approach to planning for the future. But it's more than just a comprehensive plan every 5 years. We've got problems that we need to recognize and address. Problems with health of our citizens, 133 out of 133 at the very bottom of the heap. We've got an extremely high rate of illiteracy within our public schools. We've got a mind-numbing amount of poverty. The numbers that were given to us in the most recent meeting of council about the different measures of policy of poverty in Petersburg, they're the product of a very sick economy, and we need to recognize. But how do we go about changing them? I think we'd benefit from somebody coming in here with Virginia experience not somebody from California or Indiana, but somebody who knows Virginia law, Virginia possibilities, Virginia grant programs. Certainly we can learn from cities outside of Virginia, but somebody who's familiar with Virginia laws and Virginia municipal government, as to advise us to come up with a game plan, which we can either accept or reject. But I think that's going to be essential. I don't think we have the knowledge ourselves, we members of council, what the potential options are. I think it's going to take a professional urban planner to help direct us, or someone with strong urban planning background to direct us. Now, what are the specifics of where we go from where we are? I guess this discussion is a beginning, and I'd like to see what everyone else's thoughts are and see where those thoughts might help us go in terms of an evolving plan for addressing our various measures of disappointment in terms of being a thriving municipal government.
Right.
But I welcome everyone else's thoughts.
Yes, and Councilman Cover, I just want to chime in on that, because it's like I want to first start off with it takes council having have a leadership team that can deliver, and that's something that Petersburg hasn't had in some time. And I would really like to applaud our city manager and her staff. They have gone above and beyond with the whole AMPAC and Civica deal and flow. I think very few people know the amount of work that our team has done behind the scenes. It's been a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous lift, a lot of meetings with the state, showing up that asking for their assistance and funding. We had designated personnel talk to these companies. I mean, Aretha was a genius on getting all of these companies together when we hosted a lunch for them at the McElwain House, which was phenomenal, and it starts with us selling the city ourselves. And Ms. Benavidez crushed it, and everybody from Flow to AMPAC to Civica says, hey, this is a really neat place here in Petersburg, and we will really take a strong look at building our facilities here. So it starts at the top and works its way down. And we have companies that are interested in doing those long-term plannings. And Ms. Benavidez and I have been in several meetings with a lot of these outside planners that are interested in doing business here in the city. But just like with most other parts of the United States right now dealing with COVID, we have to get past this to be able to get that level of community engagement. And right now, when we talk to a lot of these past planners last year, Ms. Benavidez, it wasn't the time to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars when we're in a pandemic and couldn't get together as a group. So that is slowed. So on top of that, it takes a team at the top, and I just don't want to short a lot of the efforts that our team has done here, because it's been some great achievements from a city that haven't had a whole lot of hits. And I think part of that is being addressed now on that state stage of the Commonwealth of Virginia, in which they realize that a lot of the primarily minority communities in the Commonwealth have not had that type of support and resources in order to attract a lot of those large scale developers. And they have to be a partner in this, even in the planning process. We just have to admit that Petersburg, along with other cities in the Commonwealth, have been redlined by a lot of banks as far as with lending. There's still an issue now with lending to primarily African American communities. They ran into that with a lot of areas, like even from the Trailways bus station, from a guy like Mr. Fabini, who has done projects in Stony Point, but he's having trouble getting financing for projects in Petersburg. So it takes a whole holistic approach to understand that we have been unfairly put in the box. And I think now the Commonwealth, definitely with Governor Northam, is doing everything that he can to support us in those efforts. Because just in being a smaller city, we don't have the resources as, say, like the Chesterfields of the world, who have over a dozen people in economic development, another 20-some people in planning. So we really have to rely heavy and admit that, hey, we are behind. We have these huge disparities, and the world hasn't been fair to Petersburg, but yet we have to also make sure we have a progressive staff. So it takes council, making those right decisions and permanent management when Ms. Benavidez leave, and getting someone who's more of a visionary, that's aggressive, because we don't have any time to be complacent. Like Ms. Benavidez says, we've been real fortunate, and you drive through other localities, you see a lot of the strip malls closing up in other areas where they were once retail, and even our smaller businesses here in the city are definitely growing, and they are excited to be here. And I'm quite bullish on the Petersburg economy growing, because something that we've seen in a lot of our when we were going to Virginia Municipal League and to the National League of Cities, we're saying that everyone wants a stroll district, and that's something that Petersburg have that is really attractive to a lot of our millennials and younger people that are still moving in Petersburg in the droves, when lots of the counties are losing population now, because a lot of their young people don't want to stay, because they want more of the amenities of the fancy lofts with the gyms and having the restaurants and everything around them, creating those stroll districts. So I believe we are on our way, but we definitely have to stay progressive and definitely get leadership in place to execute those goals. And part of the problem the huge problem is continuity. And we've managed to do some great things as a council, because we've all managed to stay in our seats. But when you have those long-term council planning, and when councils turn over, like a lot of them really do, just because this 2021 plan is the plan that we put together long-term for the city. In 2 years, things can definitely change. You can have 3 or 4 new people that say we want to do something different. So it takes strong management and getting those right people in place to definitely grow the city. So I'm gonna go to Councilman Hill, then Councilman Wilson Smith, just to chime in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm gonna have to get off this line in a minute because I have a dental appointment to get to, but I'll just say this. I know a lot of times we see a lot of things in which we want, but I like to celebrate from whence we've come to where we are now. We do have a ways to go, and that's not to say that everything is done that we want to get done. But I can remember coming on council when everything happened and the bubble dropped and finances was in a shamble, and where we are now. So I think that one of the problems we have as a city is this council, in particular, the most senior members of council, they've been on the longest. We have been so busy putting out fires and what have you. And then we're at a point now where we can really set the direction and what have you from 4 to 5 years ago to now. We still have financial restraints on us, but we're not the way that we were. So I like to celebrate all the things that we've done thus far. AMPAC is a game changer. They could have went anywhere else. There's only 3 of them in the country, and one of them are here. One is in Texas, one is in California, and one is right here in Petersburg. So, and there are other plants that have closed down all across the country that probably could have housed them, but for some reason, logistics or whatever they came here. And we have a lot of development. People are looking at the cow patch down there across the street from Thacker's. And we got a lot of things that's in the pipeline. So I think our major point is to help us grow economically is to continue to build up our planning department, continue to get us a economic developer, a person is placed that'll be in place to buy into the vision of the city, and the council itself. We all have our ideas of what the city should look like, but at the end of the day, we know that we want to take care of our children, which is the school system, and we have a relationship with them now. We're building a bond with them, because your hub in most cities, for especially younger people who are trying to start a family, is the school system. So we have to, of course, invest in them and in our recreation department as well. So things like that, along with promoting ourselves, promoting our business, promoting the city. We had our city manager with her team have done a lot of leg work that I guess most other cities didn't have to do because of whatever their economic situation is. We went through the water thing and all that stuff. So we've been so busy putting out fires and trying to get us at a level to where we are now. So I don't want us to, I want us to continue to celebrate the things that we've done thus far, but still look towards the future. And we can come together with an economic plan and this, that, and another. But like you said, when you get different people on board, they may have different vision. Not saying that is not a good vision of the city, but you just don't know. So everybody has their strong suit and what they like to see in the city of Petersburg. Me and the mayor, we often talk about industry and things of that nature. But small businesses are the things that drive this city. We all know the small business drives this city, whether it's the south end of the city or if it's the northern end of the city. That's what drives this city. It's good to have an impact, but at the end of the day, those people who get up 9 to 5 and come here and open up their businesses and things of that nature, those are the things that drive the city economic, and along with our citizens patronizing them. So let's not miss the small things. We have a great team. We're going to be, losing our city manager, but we pray that the Lord would send us someone that's just as valuable as she is to the city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have to get off because it's 12:30 now. I got to really get ready for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilwoman Wilson Smith.
Yeah, I think I probably forgot everything I was getting ready to say, but here goes. When we talk about leadership, I think it's important to examine ourselves. And I think that we could be a lot further than what we are. We could do a lot more than what we have done if we would come together as a whole. There are often suggestions made to this council, first of all, by the citizens who come to us with good ideas and things that we can do. But I know for a fact, I sit there and I come up with, hey, y'all, I got a good idea. Not that all my ideas have to be taken. I understand that. I think one way, and there's a big age gap, so I understand that as well. But I remember in 2018, I presented an idea to us that clearly stated that if we focused on our African-American history, we could pocket a lot of money. Can you imagine, just imagine, going into the home that Judge Roger Gregory grew up in and people being charged to go into that home? That's money for the city. Well, you can't, but I guarantee you, from developers who have come here and clearly stated to us in a council meeting, if you would promote your African-American history, this city could thrive. You can go to Philadelphia and see a statue of Moses Malone, but you can't see nothing but a t-shirt about him in this city. And we don't want to say anything about any of that because one person doesn't believe in it and one person does. We have got to look within ourselves. We can't say that our children in the school system are illiterate. If they're in school, I doubt if they're the illiterate ones. It would be people who have graduated and did not get some things. That's a whole system that we have to look at, but we all got to be on the same page with the understanding that we have got to pour our money into our schools in order for our schools to flourish. Once our educational system becomes top-notch, people would move to Petersburg if they had to sleep in a cardboard box. Everybody wants their child to be educated. We've got to get our priorities in order, and we got to not be afraid to listen to somebody else who is almost just as old as you, Mr. Cuthbert, who just has a different take on things. Yeah, the African-American experience in this city would do well. We would do well. We keep promoting ourselves as a historical city, but we promote the Civil War. We don't promote anything else. We promote the Civil War. And how do you call yourself a group of African-American leaders who can't promote its own history? I have an issue with that. And okay, I'm going to calm down too, but that's my take on leadership. We don't need nobody else to come in here and tell us what to do. Not if we're true leaders. We just need to lead. We need to just get up off our high horses, not be afraid to listen to one another, not be afraid to agree with one another sometimes. Just ask ourselves, what can we do as a group? What is our role as the people that we are? It's African American History Month, and this city doesn't have anything planned. I think that's sad. And okay, I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, and to wrap up, Ms. Benavidez?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The fact
Councilman
remains,
Cuthbert?
we have no plan. And we're going to continue to drift without a plan. Just like the last 75 or 100 years of city councils have drifted. We have no plan. And denying that problems exist is not going to lead us to solve the problem. We do have a tremendous problem with illiteracy in our public schools. Fewer than 50% of our children cannot read at grade level as of 2018 in the 3rd grade. If we're going to maximize the opportunities for those children, we've got to teach them to read. And just saying we've got aspirations for building a good relationship with the school board is not going to change the numbers on kids reading. Now, the only reason I scoffed at Ms. Wilson Smith's comments, she asked a rhetorical question. Can you imagine people lining up to go through Roger Gregory's house in the Heights? I can't. On a day-by-day basis, people lining up to go through the house? No, I can't. I don't think that's realistic. Might make us feel good to say it, but I don't think it's realistic. But I don't want to get lost in that. Let me go back to the plan. We have no plan. Just like the last 50 city councils or 100 city councils before us has, to my knowledge, has had no plan. We need a plan, and we need someone to help us develop it. And it's more than hiring an economic development director. We need a written document that we can all support, and we don't have it. And I think 4 years from now, we're going to be continuing to drift without a written plan. So that's where I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So, Councilman Cuthbert, are you in favor of bringing in the professional planning firm, just to get a feel of
certainly
someone
like
to come in and draw up a long-term plan?
I think we should solicit proposals from planners to guide us. Yes. Now, whether we accept their proposals remains to be seen. It depends on, of course, what the proposal is, or some insight that the planners may give us into what the proposal would be. But I certainly think we should be soliciting interest from long-term planners with municipal experience in Virginia to help guide us, because the numbers that we've got in this city, as I've said before, in terms of physical health, in terms of poverty, in terms of literacy, they are huge impediments to Petersburg's future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Ms. Benavidez.
To tie to what Mr. Cuthbert said, and I think we talked about this in the beginning when we started, the plan that you all have, you have two plans in government. You have a strategic plan and a comprehensive plan. You can also have an economic development strategic plan. All of these plans are what guide what you do, and those are policy documents set. The strategic plan is by council with implementation by staff. Your comprehensive plan starts with your planning commission, but still adopted by council. And so the economic development plan can be done by the EDA or the staff, but adopted by council. A plan is a sheet of paper, is a book. It only matters if you follow the plans. And I do believe that you can bring in external experts who can come in, and as Mr. Cuthbert said, there are companies and cities out there that have hired, but what they're going to give you is a comprehensive plan. In the District of Columbia, we had one. In state of California, it's required by law, and many states require that. The key to any plan is the ability to implement and the following those process. The second key is the agreed upon, what does it look like? I remember when I first came here and I heard everyone say, we need economic development, but what does that mean? And so having someone who's outside, not a staff person, because in most organizations, we would love to spend at least $400,000 or $500,000 for someone outside to tell us what to do so that we can feel better. But in some cases, it takes outside expertise that have worked with different jurisdictions like ours to come in and help us to pull out the thoughts that are in our head. But the key to the plan that I will say to Mr. Cuthbert, I will say to the mayor and everyone on council and our residents, is our ability to stick to the plan and follow that plan. And that will be the most important next step for this city once you have a identified plan. And I think that within our staff and within our leadership, I believe that it's possible. I believe that all things are possible, but the agreed upon plan must be implemented and followed through in the long run. So.
Okay, thank you. So we will definitely look at putting out a RFP, at least look at some proposals on.
We've actually done that, Mayor. We started the process with Ms. Michelle in looking at someone to take the lead, because when Michelle left, we started a transition. I think what I would say to you is, because this is a planning function first, is to direct staff to solicit and to encourage them, or actually to direct staff to solicit a vendor to partner with the city in developing this plan. It falls under Mr. Lyons and Mr. Reggie. I believe that it's something that's doable. I know that we'd even put money in the budget under CDB initially for this process. If this is the wish of council, I just think we need to bring back to you all a process just like we did for the ERP of soliciting and moving forward with this.
Okay, thank you. Could you bring that back to us, and we can make a decision on which direction we want to go?
Yes. Before I leave, I'll work with Mr. Lyons and Mr. Tabor and Mr. Jeremy on how we can go forward with this and bringing in some outside help, because I think it'll be valuable to you.
And Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, not only will we bring that back, but at a future work study session, we want to sit down and educate the entire city council on development projects that we have on the table. You all need to see the comprehensive list for us to walk you through. Secondly, we want to be able to talk to you more thoroughly about the stuff that we've done in the code area. Thirdly, we want to be able to highlight for you all the work that we have done as it relates to overall economic development, including how we proceed getting through the liquidation in some ways of city-owned properties. One of the things that we also will bring back to you at a later date as well, we've got to also talk with you as we have this conversation about water, sewer moving forward. What does that mean? Capacity, lack of, additional, whatever those things are. And so all of those things that we are talking about specifically from an economic development is the kind of conversation that you all need to hear, and we're working on pulling that together, that information, so you will have a better understanding of where we're going and some potential upside and impediments moving forward as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so like, yes.
Just one recommendation.
Vice Mayor Smith Lee.
I think that's
okay. Okay, excuse me. That's sorry about that. That's Miss Patrice Elliott. Y'all sounded alike for some reason.
No worries, no worries. Madam City Manager made a very good point. One option that you can pursue as well is an RFI, which is a request for information. And so that's a different procurement mechanism whereby if you don't know what you're looking for and you just want vendors to give you ideas, that's non-obligating, that doesn't cost a penny, because they, in the end of the day, they want to win the work. If they can kind of give you some ideas, and from there you can convert it to an RFP. And so Reggie can, maybe even provide some vendors he has in mind that they want to ping to say, hey, can you give us some information? That way we don't have to write the scope, we don't have to do anything. All we have to say, this is what we want to do. You tell us how we can do it, and then that becomes your scope in the RFP going forward.
Okay, thank you for the information on the RFI. That's a new one for me. Okay, so we'll get all that together and be able to present that, and maybe at the work session, maybe on the 2nd, maybe we can pull that RFI together. Does that sound reasonable?
On the agenda, yes, at least to talk about next steps.
Okay. All right, that works. So, all right, next we had item 3. Thank you all for the time and for the discussion and conversation. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.